First, we understood the difference between torts versus crimes, and then we understood the difference between torts versus contracts. And now that we are going to understand the difference between torts versus breach of trust. Hey guys, welcome to my legal classes. This is Ganesh Pujari, and in the series of Law of Torts, we are going to understand in 2 slides what are the difference between torts versus breach of trust. We are going to understand them in the first slide with the help of a simple table, and then in my way, that is with the help of a simple chart. Not taking much of your time, let's get into the first slide. Torts versus breach of trust. Before we start any discussion on this topic, we need to have a simple idea as to what are breach of trust. I will give 2 examples, one with movable property, the other one with immovable property. First, let's go with movable property. Imagine A is the owner of a particular car and he is handing over that car to Mr. X, okay, with some purpose. Okay, X has to use that car which A has told for or given for. Now X, instead of using that car only for the purposes which are being told by A, he also gives that car in rent to Mr. Y, Z, etc. Now that is breach of trust, because A has trusted X and given that car for a particular purpose, but X is breaching them. That's the first way of breaching the trust or breaching of trust when it comes to movable property. And now let us try understand one example about immovable property. Imagine A has certain property. He writes those property to trust and makes X as trustee. And he also says that K, L, M, N are the beneficiaries for this trustee. Whatever income is coming from this property, X has to pass this to K, L, M and N. Now X, instead of passing that to K, L, M, N, he is passing it to his relatives Y and Z. Now he is breaching the trust of the author or the owner of the trust or Mr. A. So that is also breach of trust. That's about breach of trust. Have this concept in mind while we are discussing the table as well as the chart. Torts versus breach of trust. Let us try understand this concept with the help of simple table in this slide, and in the next slide I have made it simpler with the help of chart. There we are not seeing all the points, but here in this table we have as many as 1 dozen differences between torts versus breach of trust. How are we understanding the table? There are serial numbers and then we have heads. For each heads, what are the difference? That is what we are going to understand. The first being the nature. The nature of torts are civil wrong. Whereas when it comes to breach of trust, the nature of breach of trust is there is some breach of trust. The second head is rights and duties. Who are fixing the rights and duties? For torts, they are fixed by law. Basically, the common laws or the precedents are fixing the torts, rights and duties. We don't have codified law for that. But for breach of trust, mostly they are fixed by the Trust Act, and in Indian context, we also discuss about criminal breach of trust under IPC. The aim of torts are to prevent harms, whereas the aims of breach of trust is to prevent the misuse, and if there are any misuse, make good the loss. That is the concept that we are understanding when it comes to breach of trust, and that's the third difference. When it comes to the duty towards, under tort the duty is towards the whole society, whereas under breach of trust it limits to only those parties which are involved in that trust, like for example author and trustee or trustee and beneficiary or any of these 3 parties. It is limited to that only. So duty towards torts are towards the whole society, whereas when it comes to breach of trust, it is limited to the 3 parties which are involved in trust only. The fifth difference, motive and intention. Under torts, partially it will be relevant. It will be seen case to case basis whether the motive or intention will be taken into consideration or not. That depends case to case basis. Whereas under trust, the motive or intention is also one of the relevant fact. What are the ingredients for torts? There should be civil wrong and that should infringe somebody's legal rights. That's the major two ingredients of torts. Whereas in breach of trust, there needs to be breach of trust. Somebody is trusting someone and making a trustee, and that trustee is breaching the trust. That way, under breach of trust also there are two major ingredients, trusting and then breaching the trust. The seventh head is remedy. Who is paying the compensation? In the case of torts, compensation will be paid by the wrongdoer or the tortfeasor, whereas in breach of trust, compensation will be either paid by the trustee, or if it is breached by a beneficiary, then the beneficiary will make the loss. Scope for torts are right in rem, that means the rights will be against the entire world, whereas under breach of trust they are limited to persons who are involved in that trust, so they are right in personam. The damages under torts are unliquidated, they are not defined. It can be any amount which differs from case to case, whereas in breach of trust damages are liquidated. The 10th head, quantum of damages. Under torts they are exemplary, that means to teach a lesson to tortfeasor it can be very high, whereas in breach of trust there will be fixed damages and mostly they are limited to compensation only. When it comes to law, torts doesn't have codified law, they are completely depending upon the common laws or the precedents, whereas breach of trust or the laws related to trust are codified. Like for example, in India we have Indian Trust Act as well as IPC section 405 to 409. We are understanding criminal breach of trust. What are the acts? Under torts there is violation of legal rights, whereas under trust there is breach of law property. So these are the 12 differences that we need to remember, and to make it easy I am having chart in my next slide. Let's try understand the differences in my way. So here is the chart that I was mentioning. First let us try understand what are torts and then breach of trust, and then let's see the difference. What are torts? Torts are civil wrong which are done against individuals by infringing the civil or the legal rights of such individuals, and torts are mostly committed negligently, and for such act the wrongdoer or the tortfeasor will going to pay compensation. That's about torts. Whereas in breach of trust there is breach of trust between the parties, and such is done by breach or violation of trust intentionally, and for such intention act the person who has committed breach of trust will make good the loss. That means he is paying the compensation for whatever he has done. That's breach of trust. So torts are civil wrong, breach of trust is about breach of trust. Torts are committed against individuals, breach of trust is either committed against the author or the beneficiary by the trustee. Torts are infringing civil or legal rights, but breach of trust are all about breach or violation of trust. Torts are mostly committed negligently, whereas breach of trust are committed intentionally. For torts, the wrongdoer or the tortfeasor are paying the compensation, and in breach of trust, the person who has committed the breach of trust will make good the loss or paying the compensation. That's all we need to understand from torts versus breach of trust. With that, I am handing over this presentation to Nishan.
People say something and their face shows something else. Look at the picture. With that, I'm concluding this session. Please subscribe our channel. Please like, share and comment our videos. Thank you. Bye-bye.